What is a nation, really? I mean, it feels so ancient, so permanent, like it's been around forever. But what if I told you that the whole idea of a nation is actually pretty new? Let's get into it, because this idea is one of the most powerful forces in our world.
I mean, really think about it. People are willing to make the ultimate sacrifice for their country. But this deep personal loyalty, this connection to the nation, is a relatively new thing in the grand scheme of history. So what's the deal? What is it about these modern creations that inspires such colossal sacrifice? That's the big question we're going to tackle today.
To get our heads around this, we first have to grapple with just how, well, strange and contradictory nationalism is when you really look at it up close. For a long time, theorists were just totally stumped by it.
It really is a puzzle, and the political scientist Benedict Anderson pointed out three big paradoxes that we have to solve. So first up, from an objective historical view, nations are modern. But to nationalists, they feel timeless, ancient. That's one. Number two, the idea of having a nation is universal. Pretty much every person is expected to have one, but at the same time, every single nation sees itself as completely and utterly unique. And finally, the third one. Nationalism is this huge political force. It starts wars, it builds countries, but it doesn't really have the deep philosophical roots of, say, liberalism or socialism. It's a real head-scratcher.
So how do we crack this code? Well, the answer comes down to one single, incredibly powerful idea that just completely changed the game.
And that idea came from this very book. In Imagined Communities, Anderson came up with a totally new way of defining a nation. It wasn't about bloodlines or ancient borders. Nope, it was about something happening inside all of our heads. Okay, here's the big idea. A nation is an imagined political community. Now, imagined does not mean fake or made up, not at all. What it means is that even in the smallest nation on Earth, you will never meet or even hear of most of your fellow citizens. But in your mind, you have this image of your connection to them, a sense of communion. Let's dig into that a little more.
All right, first, it's imagined as limited. No nation thinks it includes every single person on Earth, right? There are always borders. Even the most ambitious nationalists see a future where their nation exists alongside other nations. There's always an us and a them.
Second, it's imagined as sovereign. Think about where this idea came from. The Enlightenment, the Age of Revolution. The whole point was freedom. Freedom from those old, divinely ordained monarchies. The nation, as an ideal, is supposed to be the master of its own destiny.
And last but not least, it's imagined as a community. And this one is huge. Because no matter how much real-world inequality and exploitation might exist, the nation is thought of as a deep, horizontal comradeship. And that's the feeling, that powerful sense of fraternity that makes it seem not just possible, but logical for millions to be willing to die for these limited imaginings.
Okay, so that raises a big question, right? If nations are imagined, how on earth did millions of strangers all start imagining the exact same community at the exact same time? Well, the answer, believe it or not, is technology, specifically the printing press.
Now, to get this, we have to talk about something that sounds a little abstract, but it's super important: how print changed our whole idea of time. Before print, Anderson says people lived in what he calls messianic time. The idea that everything was happening as part of some big, divine plan. But print helped create a totally new kind of time: homogeneous, empty time. A much simpler way to think of it is just clock and calendar time. A secular, shared timeline where things happen at the same time not because of destiny, but just because it's Tuesday at 9 a.m.
And what drove this new way of thinking? Two things: the novel and the newspaper. Just picture it for a second. Thousands, maybe millions of people who will never meet, all picking up the same newspaper on the same morning. In that quiet, private moment of reading, they become deeply aware that countless others are doing the exact same thing. It creates this invisible, powerful link. You're all part of the same story, moving through the same day together, an imagined community of readers.
So this new market for books, what Anderson calls print capitalism, was a game changer in three specific ways. One, it created these unified fields of communication. Printers wanted to sell as many books as possible, so they standardized languages that huge numbers of people could read. Two, print made language feel permanent, which in turn helped create this image that the language, and therefore the nation, was ancient. And third, some of these printed languages became the new languages of power, the language of government, forming the skeleton of the future nation-state.
So that's the theory of how the very first nations were forged way back when. But here's the thing. This process of imagining communities isn't just history.
It's an ongoing thing. And to see how this framework applies today, we can look at the modern and complex case of identity in Taiwan.
And as an academic paper on the subject points out, Anderson's theory has had a landmark impact. It gives scholars a really powerful analytical tool for understanding the complexities of how national identities are formed, especially in a place with such a unique and contested history. It allows us to step back from the politics and analyze the cultural and social forces at play.
So what does that actually look like? Well, instead of getting stuck in an argument about whether a Taiwanese identity is primordial, as in it's existed forever, or simply a modern political invention, this theory lets us look at the mechanisms. Scholars can analyze how a shared media landscape, a distinct education system, and common cultural experiences, everything from pop music to shared historical stories, create a powerful sense of community among 23 million people. It helps us see the formation of a distinct identity not as a political argument, but as a living, breathing social process of a community imagining itself.
So what's the big takeaway here? At the end of the day, this gives us a profound way of understanding one of the most fundamental structures of our modern world.
And the single most important thing to remember is this. Nations are not natural or inevitable. They aren't ancient destinies. They are powerful ideas, cultural artifacts. They were imagined into being by this incredible combination of capitalism, technology, and a huge shift in how we see time and our connection to strangers.
And that brings us to one last provocative thought. In our age of the internet, global social media, and new forms of shared experience, this process of imagining communities has not stopped. It's still happening all around us. So the question for us is, what new communities are we, right now, imagining into existence?